Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Voice of a Generation. Today, we're going to talk about best practices in voice design and research with seniors. My name is Yin-Juei. It's like Stingray without the S&T. I'm a senior manager of user research and health equity at Teladoc Health. This was a project that I led as lead experience researcher at Best Buy with my colleagues, Kim Johnson, lead experience researcher at Best Buy, and Ben Allen-Kingsland, senior voice user experience designer at Best Buy Health. So, first of all, why should we care about seniors? Because the demographic share of seniors is growing. By 2030, more than 20% of the US population will be over 65, which means their demographic share is doubled from where it was in 1980s. More than a quarter of seniors in Europe and North America live alone, which put them in a more vulnerable position to social isolation, chronic health challenges, and accidents than their more connected peers. And voice can help. Voice assistants have the potential to make life easier and safer for seniors, but only if the solutions are designed with empathy and deep understanding of the user needs at the core. However, there are some challenges to design for seniors. Number one, seniors are usually not that tech savvy, especially in comparison with general population and younger generation. Second, COVID puts additional challenges to approach this population in person, which means we have to think of how to approach them to understand their experience and needs in a virtual setting. Today, we're going to focus on three things. Number one, we're going to talk about the strategic principles designing for seniors' well-being in general. Second, we're going to talk about the best practices for researching seniors virtually. Third, we're going to talk about design principles for voice experiences with seniors. Let's start with how did we achieve this? We scoped the project with two phases of research, with the Wizard of Oz concept testing and iteration in the process. Phase 1 was one-on-one in-depth interviews with 11 seniors in total. These are the seniors living in the independent living community, which are the folks that are more vulnerable to social isolation in comparison with their peers living with their families. In phase 2, we had group concept testing. So during the group concept testing, we tested the concept developed based on the needs that we learned from the phase 1 interviews with 4 groups of seniors. Each group has 2 to 3 participants, depends on the recruitment capacity. And we iterate the concept based on the feedback we gathered from each group to the next group, which means that within the group concept testing, we continuously doing the concept iteration based on the feedback we gathered from every single group session. Now I'm going to share with you what we learned from the phase 1 research, which is what we call strategic principles for seniors' real well-being. The focus of this part is really about what's a senior's baseline experiences, what's their day-to-day look like, and second, what are their well-being needs. Here's a journey map created by our designer Ben. So at the center, you can see there's a line fluctuating. This is an indication of the level of solitude of senior across the day. You can see in the morning and at night, the level of solitude is high, meaning seniors typically spend this time alone by themselves. In the afternoon and evening, the level of solitude are low. if you cross-reference that line with the social activities, you can see the number of social activities in the afternoon and evening are also greater, which explain why the level of solitude are low in the afternoon and evening. The last thing on this graph is the technology use. So not surprisingly, most of them use phone, computer, TV, and tablet. What's really interesting is a lot of them actually have experiences with Alexa. What's worth noting is that their use of voice assistant is usually very basic, that they will ask the voice assistant to tell them the weather or tell them a joke. They don't typically use advanced feature like setting up a routine to help them navigate their days on a regular basis. So now let's talk about what we learned from the phase 1 research. So here are the 5 needs that we learned from the one-on-one interviews: peace of mind, connection, in control, independence, and purpose. So peace of mind is really about feeling safe and reassured about getting the help they need in time. Connection is about having a sense of belonging and feeling connected to people living in a community. In control is about being able to maintain their agency in decision making. Independence is about having the capacity to meet their needs by leveraging the resources available to them. Purpose is about feeling fulfilled and meaningful. And here are some examples of the obstacles that preventing them from meeting these needs. For example, an obstacle for peace of mind is that limited staff capacity. So because the staff capacity is limited, it's not always the case that seniors' needs can be addressed in a timely manner. And one example that prevents seniors to feel connected is that many communities actually have this age-determined structure, which means that people have the same age or living together. But just because you and I are both in our 70s doesn't mean we have shared value, doesn't mean that we have shared hobbies. So it could be very hard for us to feel connected if the fact that we're being neighbors just because we're in the same age range. An example of the obstacles of in control is many seniors talk about that they are being made decision upon instead of like the one making their own decisions. For example, some were being asked to wear a wearable that can detect fall incident, and that's usually be decided by their kids instead of like their own decision. And they don't like being in a situation that they don't feel they have in control. Now let's talk about how we develop the concepts that's being tested. So specifically, we focus on the 4 out of the 5 needs that I described previously: peace of mind, connection, in control, and independence. The reasons that we choose this 4 is because these are the most pronounced needs that we heard from the phase 1 research. And due to the confidentiality reasons, I'm not able to describe the details of those concepts that we developed here. Specifically, these are actually the final solutions that after we tested the concept in the groups and then we iterated, and so these are in a very close to the final form that Best Buy is interested in moving forward to. So I cannot really get into the details, but I'm going to give you a high level an overview of what each of the 6 concepts is about in the next slide. So on this slide, you can see it's a 2x2, or there are 2 axes. So the y-axis is about health or non-health. The x-axis is about high urgency or low urgency. So as you can see on the top left corner, we have this health and safety concept. So this is a concept solution that's mostly used to address the use case that's health related and high urgent situation. On the top right, you can see personal health. This is for the use case where it's health related but low urgent situation. On the bottom right, we have 2 concepts. One is community service version 2, one is personal aid. So in both of this are for the low urgent situation, and that's not health related. And the personal aid is more like a personal assistant that to support seniors. And community service version 2 is really to address the needs that require a communication between the community and the senior individuals, because these are the seniors living in the independent living communities. And the bottom left, we have another two, which is safety net and community service version 1. So both of these are not health related and high urgent use cases. So for safety net, it's really for like urgency scenarios, and for the community services, it's really about that has a sense of urgency that's not health related, and it's helping to connecting the community and the senior as an individual. So I hope this give you an idea of what kind of use case these concept solutions are trying to address, before we walk into how we test them in the group setting. And next, my colleague Kim is going to talk about the best practice for research seniors in a virtual setting.
Thanks, Yin-Juei. Now that you have a view of what we learned, let me give you a peek into what we did. I'll give you details about how we conducted the concept testing phase of our research. As a reminder, we conducted 4 online groups with 10 total seniors, with either 2 or 3 seniors per group. Across the 4 online groups, we validated the information we'd previously gathered about a typical day and day-to-day well-being of seniors. After that, the majority of our time was spent introducing and testing voice-activated prototypes, which we did over 4 parts of our group conversation, parts 2 through 5 on the screen. Our goals were to encourage participation from everyone in a natural way and to test the many prototypes and use cases while being efficient with time and mindful of the cognitive load of the endeavor. To do this, we employed strategies like testing a predetermined subset of 3 prototypes in each group rather than all of them in every group, having the seniors each test only one of the 3 concepts, using polls to quickly gather levels of appeal prior to discussion, and saving time by using polls to test the appeal of 12 additional concept use cases. And of course, to meet our goals, we put a great deal of preparation and planning into the voice concepts themselves. Our designer, Ben, used VoiceFlow to design complex conversation flows that could handle any scenario or response our testers imagined for us, which gave us the flexibility to follow the lead of our participants in a natural conversational way and to discover what they wanted and expected. What you're seeing here is a flow for just one prototype. It has 2 participant entry points and somewhere around 8 to 10 different conversation paths. The green boxes are instructions for the researcher to allow us to quickly choose the path to take. There is color coding to indicate when the voice prototype is speaking, the research participant, a simple audio sound, or a human operator or a nurse. And as we mentioned earlier, this prototyping was iterative. After the first and second groups, we added a few new utterances and paths to the flow to increase clarity and better anticipate what research participants might try to do. The prototype was also realistic in how it sounded. We changed the accent and gender of the voice used across the research groups to reduce bias. On the next slide, I'll talk about how we did all this and how we presented this prototype to research participants. We use the Wizard of Oz technique to help represent these complicated prototypes to research participants. Wizard of Oz involves having a human being behind the scenes, the hidden wizard who seemingly, magically makes things happen, in this case, either me or Yin-Juei. The hidden wizard manually operates the conversation flow by pressing buttons in VoiceFlow to respond to the utterances of the research participant. Wizard of Oz is well suited to prototype testing since no development is needed, which saves time and money, and it simplifies the work because not every utterance and every logic path needs to be represented, as is the case here. The alternative to this technique, of course, is a high-fidelity prototype, which is fully pre-programmed and automated. So, how exactly did we do it? Well, the hidden wizard started with listening for the participant's first utterance, and then clicking buttons in the VoiceFlow prototype to play the next utterance, and so on as the utterances took the form of a conversation, back and forth. The flow shown on this slide is one of our most complex prototypes, which accommodated a very open-ended scenario, and I'm only showing part of it. This flow involved a handoff from the participant to the voice assistant, back to the participant, and sometimes over to a quote-unquote human phone operator or dispatcher, or even to a quote-unquote nurse. You can see that reflected in the visual with black human heads versus blue robots. In the situation when a handoff happened to a quote-unquote 911 operator or nurse, the hidden wizard, me or Yin-Juei, we spoke using our human voice instead of pressing a button, which added to the realism of having both robotic sounds and human sounds. So this is what was happening behind the scenes. And next, I'll show you a peek at what things looked like for the research participants in front of the curtain, if you would. As expected, research participants saw none of the behind-the-scenes details of the conversation flows I just showed you. As you can see here, the interviewer, in this case our designer Ben, interacted directly with our participants. In this case, the two generic people icons on the screen. The researcher serving as the hidden wizard was visually hidden from research participants, as in the story of The Wizard of Oz, and a picture of a speaker was shown on the screen instead. Here are our 3 biggest tips for using the Wizard of Oz technique successfully. As you can imagine, we piloted this and pre-tested it more times than I can count prior to conducting our first research group. Our pilots included one-on-one meetings with research or design colleagues and culminated in a full group of seniors to allow us to pilot the entire end-to-end process. Secondly, once the research groups started in earnest, one participant was asked to volunteer to perform an audio test prior to concept testing, something like asking for the weather. This served several purposes: building comfort with voice technology, building comfort with this prototype, and establishing expectations for the process. Finally, the complexity of this technique and this technology requires many people. In most situations, we had 3 people working together to pull this off. Someone on screen asking questions, someone acting as the wizard, and someone else taking notes or handling any troubleshooting issues. While there are challenges to research with seniors in person as well as virtually, the virtual realm poses extra challenges that are worth mentioning. Not only are they addressable, but they're well worth the consideration and planning time. First, group dynamics are well known to be an asset in certain types of research, especially with new or unknown prototypes or those which may raise concerns. We found the group dynamic brought an extra layer of realism to the experience, with seniors learning from each other, asking questions, and listening to each other's perspectives. As much as we were tempted to include 4 to 6 seniors per group, we limited it to 3 because we discovered during piloting that too many people added to the cognitive load for everyone and would require too much time to gather the quality of insights we wanted. Secondly, we worked hard to include seniors with various levels of technology savviness so as not to omit the perspectives of those who lacked comfort with Zoom meetings. We encouraged anyone who fit our study's criteria to consider joining with the promise of technology assistance. Every participant did a practice Zoom a few days prior to our group and was offered troubleshooting help for sound, internet connections, and the basics of logging in. We still had some hiccups on research day, but many fewer. Budgeting extra time, finally, more than usual, was a critical factor for the success of our concept testing groups. Research with seniors has taught us there is a slower pace to conversations that helps counteract cognitive load and is very valuable to the effort of gathering insight. In addition, given the nature of the topic, seniors' health and safety and their daily lives, we expected and left time for discussion and stories of a heavy nature, the kind that requires some time to acknowledge and transition from. Now, I'll hand off to Ben to discuss design takeaways.
Thanks so much, Kim. So we wanted to end with a couple of takeaways, knowing that those of you watching this talk today might not be in the health space, might not work with seniors right now. We wanted to share some things that might be broadly applicable no matter what you're designing. One of the biggest lessons I would say is when you think about seniors, just realizing what a huge class of people that is and how important it is to pick a particular segment. Here's just an illustration. Let's take the Wayback Machine to 2007 when the iPhone was being announced, when the Crackberry craze was everywhere and Blackberries were absolutely in the hands of zillions of people, right? The smartphone era was firmly upon us. 2007, 15 years ago, the people who were in their prime earning years, like 45 to 55, were almost certainly using smartphones, or at least quite aware of the new technology as a class. Well, zoom ahead 15 years, those folks are absolutely seniors right now by any definition. And here on the screen, I put just a handful of individuals who I think fit this category of seniors, early retirement-ish age seniors who are having absolutely no trouble making technology do whatever they want it to do. Jane Lynch in entertainment, President Obama in politics, Whoopi Goldberg in media more broadly. There are absolutely seniors in this broad demographic for whom tech use doesn't come naturally. Tech savviness is low, as Ingrid quite rightly called out at the start of the presentation. And if you want to create something that's of benefit to that segment of seniors, possibly folks who were already retired when the smartphone era was really kicking off, and who are now 15 years past that, that's absolutely vital, and that's important work to do. But if you're looking for people who are quote unquote seniors and who are also incredibly tech savvy and have grown up with technology in a way just as much as a millennial like myself has, that segment is totally out there too. One thing I'll call out too, it's specifically in the health world, systems for seniors, like for example, a medical alert system that you might wear to call for help, something that will work for an 80-year-old or a 90-year-old. Oftentimes, the caregiver in that situation might be an adult child who is themselves a senior, who might be a 60-year-old. And I can tell you there's very little way that someone who is themselves a senior and 60 and just bought a medical alert of a certain type for their aging parent is also going to say and embrace, oh yes, that's for me too, right? So just as you're thinking about your product, pick a particular segment instead of thinking of seniors as a monolith. So another thing here, those of us in the voice community might want to think we're pretty cool, right? Like we're pushing the boundaries of how humans and machines interact, and we're doing Star Trek kind of stuff in what we develop. And while that's true, what our research showed was that that's not likely to be motivating for seniors in terms of what they adopt. There was essentially zero emphasis when people talked about the themes that were important to them on like, oh, I want to seem cool to my neighbors, or I have something to prove. No, seniors have reached a point where they, like this quote says, they're just natural. They say what they want to say. They're unafraid. They're comfortable in their own skin. And so pursuing status and trying to lean on that or count on that as a reason that they'll adopt your system in voice probably isn't going to fly. So if that's not going to fly, what is? Here are just a couple of things to think through. Relevance. Is your voice-based system meeting a really specific need in seniors' lives? Like, yes, I can have home automations where I can say sprinkle and like the sprinklers in my yard will turn on, but like, why would I want that? If I'm a senior and I have patterns that have been working for me for a long time, why would I go to the extra effort to learn a new system and set it all up just for that? It's got to be really relevant to something that I actually need. It should also drive convenience, right? Like, is this resonated with the seniors we talked to, this idea of systems that remove stress or remove steps in a process and save time. That was motivating. So focusing on that kind of thing can be useful, though not too far, because we did have seniors who say like, my daddy always told me you have to do the math yourself and you can't rely on the calculator. This idea that cognitive decline can be staved off at least to some extent by using your brain, doing crossword puzzles and other sort of mental training, is very popular among seniors and has some merit. So the idea of voice assistants or other systems that would take too much responsibility away from the person threatened this theme of independence that was core to us. So think about that. Not convenient, but not too convenient. Finally, consistency. In our Wizard of Oz testing, it really improved the peace of mind of users. It hit this peace of mind theme to think that even in an emergency, they wouldn't have to say precisely the right words for a system to help them, that there would be this sort of big expansive NL that they could talk to and it would understand them. So the more development we could do, particularly for seniors, to make the NL really strong so the system works consistently for them as much as possible, working right the first time, that means a lot. And so then one final takeaway to leave you with is to find ways to lean into this demographic where you can in your work. And not just because it's a huge share of the market with a lot of buying power. It's because I can't tell you how satisfying it was to be part of this research and see in this focus groups these little micro communities that form between these seniors who are sharing stories with each other and sharing vulnerabilities with each other, and then tips about like how they address this and that. It was really gratifying. We could just sort of sit back and watch it happen. Voice has really wonderful potential to make life simpler and easier and help for seniors, and for its accessibility angles, and also just the ways it can help connect individuals to each other. So think hard about not just creating for seniors as like a passive recipient of your wisdom, but are there ways your technologies can help seniors connect with each other, create new things, and continue to learn? These themes of connection and purpose showed up in our research a lot. And one thing that we're looking at is, are there ways we can have maybe some of these younger seniors who are more tech savvy connected with older seniors to help teach them about voice and like sort of build the pie for grow the pie for everybody. It's exciting research, and we had so much fun doing it. And with that, on behalf of Ingray, Kim, and all of us at Best Buy Health, I really hope you enjoyed this talk today, and we hope it stirred up something that you can take back to your work. Thank you so much for being here.